Hi folks, look, I'm going to have a little experiment today and try and run a Zoom meeting and try and record that and use my PowerPoint presentation to show you a little bit about the different styles of white mould cheese. So just forgive the little playing around with the technology, but different styles of white mould cheese, white mould such as Camembert and Brie. The traditional style is what we would know if we were traveling through France and we would buy a Brie de Meaux, a Brie de Melun, or a Camembert de Normandy, for example. Forgive the accent. And they're the traditional styles. Back in the 90s, a new style was developed, which we came to know, unfortunately, as Stabilised. It gets a bad name, gets a bad rap because of its name, because there's no stabilizers actually added to it. If it deserves a bad rap, it's because it's got much less flavor and firmer and drier and not as interesting as the traditional style. So these are the two styles. The third style, which I'll talk a bit about, and that's the pasteurized or long life Camembert or Brie. And these are cheeses which have really got no interest to me at all. Why? Well, they're basically sterilized. They've been heated in a retort or an autoclave, some of that nature, and the life, just all the enzymes and bacteria life been destroyed. So they started off with a good healthy life as a natural cheese, but then they've been heated to sterilize it, almost like the equivalent of a long life milk, UHT milk. And they're suited well in non-traditional markets and countries which don't have a lot of refrigeration. China, they're quite popular, for example, and they were popular here in Australia and New Zealand many years ago, but we've moved on from that. So that's the three styles. Just briefly about the three styles. Let's move my little pip there. Yep, we got it there. The pH stabilized, I'm calling it pH stabilized now so that you know there's no stabilizer actually added. Here we use starter cultures, good bacteria, which make the acid, but these bacteria can't make huge amounts of acid, so they can't take the pH down too low. When you make a lot of acid, you can take the pH down quite low, but these bacteria have a reasonable amount of sensitivity to the acid that they produce, so they can't actually take the pH down as much as the traditional ones can. So if we look at the pH target for the stabilized, it's around about 5 to 5.1 versus on the other side, on the right hand side, the traditional with a pH around 4.7. So and that's a very significant difference. It may only seem like a small number, but the difference between those two pHs is like chalk and cheese. The 4.7, the curd is rather chalky, crumbly, chalky, similar to a feta after the cheese has been made. On the other hand, over on the left-hand side, we've got a cheese that is more akin to a Havarti, for example, the texture of Havarti. So the difference between these two pHs is a real significant difference in acidity and also texture, but also flavor. But the pH does increase over the time of the life of a Camembert because the mold that grows on the outside, that consumes the lactic acid from the cheese and deacidifies and raises the pH through the course of maturation. So at the pH, at around about 6 weeks on both of these cheeses, the pH on the stabilized is somewhere around 6, maybe up to 7, whereas the traditional is probably somewhere between 7 and 8. So it's quite high compared to the original milk. And the shelf life, as you can see, is significantly higher for a stabilized versus a traditional on the right-hand side. So I'm going to show you a couple of pH curves here. And the pH curves are quite significantly different. The stabilized on the left-hand side here, and the top line is the pH on the surface of the cheese where the mold grows and sucks away the acid first, and eventually the center of the cheese follows. But the stabilised cheese, it doesn't really, they don't really meet up very quickly. And this line can be flattened out by temperature, by keeping the cheese colder for a longer period, and it could be 60 or 90 days, and it still only gets to a pH of around 6 to 7. Whereas the traditional cheeses, their pH goes up much faster, and they get up into the alkaline zone, and that's through the production of alkaline substances like ammonia, an ammonia solution, which actually raises the pH above neutral. So these cheeses have a much shorter shelf life, develop more flavour character, a little bit more moist as well. That delivers a lot more flavour compared to the stabilised ones, which the domain of long shelf life in supermarkets. They've got a good purpose. I mean, they're great on a barbecue. You can heat them up on a barbecue, and they'll soften and maybe go a little bit runny. But apart from that, to eat them as a table cheese, they don't nearly have so much character. Right, I think that's probably enough for today. So thank you for your attention, and we'll try and stop this right now. Cheers.